Hello everyone, I am Tacit and I'm going to be going over the Gems of War Bad to the Bones event in which the Draugr Knight is added to the game. So this week brings quite a few things. One of the most interesting, oddly enough, being a double EXP week. Not even weekend, but entire week. I'm not sure if they're doing this slightly to compensate for the fact that, PvP has been broken for the last, 7 months? Ever since those obelisks have existed, giving out only 3 XP. So maybe this is some small way of giving back for that. But they actually used to do these in the past, like a double gold weekend, double soul weekend. Obviously, that has mostly been replaced with the most recent weekend we had, Vault event weekends, more so Palooza weekends. However, yeah, they haven't done something like this for a long while, so great time to be farming XP if nothing else. It's kind of nice too, given that we don't have guild wars anymore, and of course that was kind of the double XP week in a sense, assuming your guild was winning a ton. So, yeah, they're bringing this back, so that's kind of interesting. So plenty of extra XP. Obviously, you'd pretty much be using the same team you'd be using for whatever you just did for Vault event weekend. So a little bit unfortunate to do it back to back since, well, if you were had fun doing it for the last 3 days, you get to do it for another week. Except now for XP instead of all the Palooza loot and Verse loot that you would normally get. Aside from that, one other really big thing, of course, is the Fox event, or more so the Beast event. But we have it Fox themed this time around. So the troop's actually pretty nice as a choice option. We'll get around to that in a moment. But yeah, it's among one of the better choice options. It is the first ever double convert. It'll be a little bit slow to use because you have to account for so many converts. However, it has a lot of solid potential to be good in various team synergies, particularly in the Elemental category, but potentially some in Beast as well. And beyond that, this is the final week to finish out the current campaign of the Frostbound Sword, so definitely make sure to do so, especially if you end up paying for the pass, as you'll be able to go get the Mythic and everything else along the way. But this is the very last week, so if you're going to buy the pass or anything else, make sure to do so before the end of the week, even if you haven't yet. Actually, I literally just did as I started this video, so we'll be able to go get him later tonight. But anyways, let's go and start from the top and go with the new troop. So this guy, you can stock up on brown, red arcanes if you end up needing it. As far as the troop itself, I would say he's bad. However, he might be your best damage source, potentially, for the current Undead Blue event we have for Journey. The low rarity options have very, very few damage sources, and most of the other damage sources that do exist are pretty luck-based, and this guy, well, is also pretty luck-based. He submerges himself, so he keeps himself a little bit protected, but the most noteworthy thing is he def marks 2 random enemies. In a normal battle, this is pretty low value, but 2 def marks for 11 mana costs, not too bad if you need a low rarity damage. Obviously very luck-based, and you need to make sure that the enemy actually can be def marked, otherwise you'll need a cursor on your team. But it will probably find its way into some people's Journey event teams if you're missing a lot of the Mythic's damage sources. But ideally, hopefully you have at least one of the bigger damage sources so you don't have to resort to this, but this potentially will be your last resort option if you do need something for Journey, so it has that going for it. Though, similar to a lot of the things that have been getting the Haunted this season, there just isn't anything good that really uses the Ghost Gem. The Mythic from the Season Pass is not too bad. We'll probably cover a video on him on Friday. But beyond that, there isn't really too many things that ends up coming into the game that even remotely use this Ghost Gem to any degree that is worthwhile, which is kind of unfortunate, as I feel like the Booty Gem, oddly enough, end up getting at least a little bit better usage because of things like the Ruby weapon and similar things. But anyways, as far as the event key drop table is concerned, it is for Merlantis. As far as Merlantis is concerned, if we go over to the good old, actually let's do base rarity first, show all, and the good old Kingdom of Merlantis. What do we have going on here? So apply filter. Is it worth opening event keys? Well, first things first, what is and is not in drop table? So everything you see here, except for the faction troops from, where is it? The faction troops from... hello, faction name? There it is. Sea of Sorrow. So the faction troops from Sea of Sorrow are not in the event key drop table. The Journey troop is not in the event key drop table. If I could just find where it is. There it is. The Journey troop is not an event key drop table. You can only get it from the current Journey shop this week. And aside from that, it looks like the rest are in drop table. So if you're going to open event keys, I would say it's pretty skippable unless you're looking to get a certain star level. I believe it can reach 27 star, though it's kind of locked at 26 for the reason pretty much every kingdom is, in that it doesn't have enough writs currently in the game, or more so deeds, in order to go and get it leveled. As far as event keys are concerned, if you're trying to open, you're mostly looking for Pisia, though oddly enough, spoilers, he is in Soulforge this week. So if you have the diamonds for it and you really want your Pisia, you could maybe try some event keys, and if you don't get in a couple hundred or however many you're willing to open, as it could take as many as 3,000 plus, as there are 3 mythics here. It's about 1 in 1,000 or so. But if you want to like try your event keys for him, if you've been wanting to get him for a while, and you don't end up getting him, well, you can just get him in Soul Forge this week for 4,000 diamonds. So this week's definitely the Pisia week. So if you really want Pisia, you have 2 different ways of getting him, both event keys and diamonds. But that's pretty much the only really noteworthy thing here. A lot of things here aren't really used too often, and pretty much doesn't really get much use case, unfortunately. Merlantis in general is a really submerge-heavy area, which Submerge, not bad, but ironically, Submerge is such a hard counter to AoE that you generally don't need to use it, because there's just already so much Submerge out there, especially through hero classes and the such. And Submerging when you're already submerged, of course, does nothing, so Aquaticus, while good for Submerge, is generally overkill. Compared to, just having Hero do it passively off of just a few extra turns. So very rarely do you tend to do these Submerge synergies, even though that is pretty much what Merlantis is known for. And that, and of course, the Merfolk synergy that it has. Anyways, beyond that, as far as the guild-related event, we kind of already mentioned it. It is Journey. Of course, you do want to be using the new Journey troop. It ends up having 2 times damage and has up to 3 times score if you have it all the way max. Keep in mind, you do have to win Journey battles as quickly as possible in order to maximize on your score. However, you will eventually get deep enough where it is pretty much impossible to get max score due to them nerfing Journey troops in the ground earlier this year. As far as options, as I was mentioning earlier, there is not that many low rarity options here, unfortunately. When we're talking about low rarity, we're talking about things like, actually, we'll click show all so I can show the other guy when we get there. There he is. But anyways, as far as low rarity is concerned, there's not much. You're basically kind of want to go down the Death Mark spam. You do have some low rarity tanks that you can get. Like if you go do some Frostfire Keep if you don't already have it. There's some shards there. You have 65% score reduction off of that. You have barrier option off of this, which will probably be your better tank. Doing like Tome Knight into Draugr Knight, the double Knight synergy there, probably going to be your main team for low rarity. Tome Knight into Draugr Knight into whatever on Earth you have to offset it, a hero weapon, and then just ideally at least win the mythics if you can. One thing that is pretty nice, which you might have laying around, as they aren't too hard to get if you end up playing some PvP, Immortal Ossifer. Great skull spam, has true damage to go with it, has curse stun so that you can actually apply your death marks, like if you only have this, and the new guy that just came out today for Glory. Like that combination, probably enough to win. A little bit luck based, but you'll eventually get some skull kills. You'll eventually get some death mark kills. You have curse stun, so you'll be able to actually death mark all of them. So worst comes to worst, you could resort to that. That's pretty low rarity, as Ossifer is not too hard to get. But at the higher range, you do have things like the many true damagers. You have, if you bought the Season Pass, you have Aldrich, which is kind of like that one 65% tank guy, but the mythic version of him. You have yourself things like, of course, Ossifer, which is pretty accessible. You have Draculus if you want to go down that true damage kind of route. Grey King for that huge disable that it has. We use it here as well. Crimson Bat if you need something kind of mid-range rarity. And as far as weapons, any of the explodey weapons that have summon, if you want to put this into second slot, going to be really good. This is probably what you're going to be doing on the low rarity teams. Use this as your second slot. Any of the explodey blue weapons that have resummon, going to be pretty good for you. Beyond that, as far as weapons are concerned, you can already see we're using it here. Ocea's Tome, really great, a lot of mana accumulation. And if you happen to have access to it, though it is currently still money locked, and I might end up doing this when we actually do it on stream, but I don't want to show it for the copy paste whenever we do end up doing it, just because it is a little bit out of reach, since if you do not have this weapon, it is not obtainable. The third component, I believe, is coming in about a month, late September, I think it was, or early October. We'll finally have the last component for it soon, but it is still money locked at the moment. But the Ruby weapon has a lot of true damage, not as much mana accumulation as something like Ocea's Tome, which almost full board clears. But the damage ratio to how much mana accumulation it does is pretty good. And of course, you can still be using the Drowned Wanderer for its ton of blues it ends up creating. While these Journey troops have been nerfed into the ground, it is still 10 blues every single time it casts. And of course, if you get it to Shiny level 1, that will be a 14 mana cost instead of 15. If your guild gets deep enough into the event, you're just going to unlock that automatically without needing to spend any Shiny keys or anything. So overall, not horrible, but the low rarity option is definitely going to be a little bit bad, as your main option is Ossifer into the new guy that ended up coming out for your double death mark. So not the greatest, but can get the job done. I'll just likely lose a lot of score for some of the slower battles if you do have to go down the death mark route compared to the true damage skull route, or even just a true damage route. There isn't Empower for skull. Unfortunately, Empower is pretty bad here, though. Only thing we have access to Empower is Astral Spirit, which is a little bit of true damage, not worth it a lot of times. and this, which if you're going all in on the skull route, like you need a low rarity option and you have Immortal Ossifer, doing this with Immortal Ossifer will be perfectly fine, but unless you're going all in on skulls, it probably isn't worth using him onto your team compared to just having a little bit more mana accumulation option. And of course, you have to use the Drowned Wanderer in order to get your multiplier, so he cannot be replaced. Anyways, other things that we have going on this week. As far as, not that, we just went over it. As far as other things, this Tuesday, we have ourselves the Merlantis faction of Sea of Sorrows, which I actually forgot what the color for that is off the top of my head. Obviously blue. Forget what the second color is. I want to say blue-red. That sounds wrong for some reason. It is blue-brown, because it is wrong. Obviously blue. Sea of Sorrows. Who could have guessed that it was blue? But yeah, it's blue-brown. Wednesday, we have ourselves one of the Merlantis pets. I think it's the crab-looking one. And Thursday, we have ourselves the Merlantis Hero Class. Generally not used too often. It's basically just Frost Mage, but worse. Only time you tend to use this hero class, it's basically a Frost Mage in the case that it has some amount of freeze into a lot amount of submerge, whereas Frost Mage is the other way around with a high amount of freeze with a low amount of submerge. But it's generally better to have a higher amount of freeze than it is to have a higher amount of submerge, as extra submerge don't really do anything, whereas extra freeze can get the whole enemy team frozen and, you know, they just don't get turns. So overall, tends to just be weaker Frost Mage unless you're building a 4x Merfolk team, which in that case, you'd probably be doing that for Underspire this week, but beyond that, it doesn't really see much usage overall. And this Friday, as you can see from this timer, we have ourselves good old Bounty Hunter with a new Bounty Hunter troop and everything coming in with that. As far as other things, of course, we mentioned it briefly, but don't forget, we do have the running of the Foxes event. So this event will be running for the next 2 weeks. Quite a bit of rewards you can get from this. Keep in mind, this is one of those game modes where you do lose out if you don't do it as a daily, so make sure you're doing this every single day. Ideally, you want to be spending 50 gems a day, with one of the days being 150, the 50 and then the 100 ones. The main reason you want to do this is if you want to get 1 copy of the armor, if you don't already have it, 1 copy of the Foxglove, which will technically give you 3, but, buy it once. 6 copies of the pet. 5 will get the pet initially maxed, and then the 6th one for an extra 200 for 700 total will end up giving you the golden version. And so far, none of the golden versions have ever returned, so if you just want it for the sake of it, it's just purely cosmetic. However, the one that actually gives stats will return in a couple months after the event. It'll be in, or about a month after the event or so, it'll be in the pet drop table. And of course, if you want to get it, the 1 power orb. And if you want to get less than that, you'd spend even less than 50 gems per day. As long as you're doing the daily every single day, doing the 50 gems per day, you should be good to go to get all the rewards. As far as priority order, it really comes down to how you want to do it. The pet, or the non-golden version of the pet and the Foxglove will return into their drop tables after the fact. Power Orb is just extra loot, and this seems to be returning every single year. So if you were to get absolutely any, I would say highest priority these days is actually to go for the pet, as none of the golden versions have ever come back, which is 700 if you want to go and get the pet max as well as get the golden version. This also technically saves you, in a sense, an entire pet orb, and a pet orb is definitely very valuable, so I would say that's highest priority. But Foxglove is actually really interesting. I might need to cover a video on it. I'm not sure when we would, maybe next week, because the event will still be going on by then. I kind of want to cover the Mythic this week. Who knows, but we'll cover them both. But it's really interesting. The biggest issue with this troop is I feel like it's going to be too slow to ever viably use in a team where you're looking to go quick, which is like most battles that you do. But in a game mode where your only condition is to win and you don't really care how slow you go, this has a lot of potential to be good. It is the first ever double convert. And what I mean by that is it has a double convert choice. It gets to either convert blue gems to green and red gems to skull, or convert brown gems to green and purple gems to skull, which is 4 completely different converts. This thing is going to be a nightmare to figure out what its alignment is at any given board state. I really wish it would like highlight it on the board when you like hover over it or something, because this is going to be a nightmare to calculate out not only if either of the two have alignment, but then if both of them have alignment, which one of the two is better overall value compared to the other. But you're going to get a lot of value from this thing once it gets full mana. Like the board state that needs to exist for this to not have alignment is very rare. You're almost always going to have alignment with this thing in one way or another. It really comes down to which one of its two is better. So it's going to be really annoying to use, but very effective if you don't mind spending extra time on a battle. So really good in areas where you have a very limited amount of battles, either because of sigils or something similar. So be interesting to see how this pans out in the future. But I really like the direction they've been going with these. They've actually been doing some pretty strong legends with these events recently. Obviously, the most previous one was Emberclaw, which was essentially a cheaper version of Takshaka, just with less damage, but overall pretty similar mana accumulation ability. So really interesting that they're actually going down, making Auto Legends viable. Sometimes more viable than Mythics. Like this thing's probably almost more viable than the Mythic that we have in the Season Pass right now. And you get this basically for free. Beyond that, it does have an interesting synergy. It creates an Entangle Gem every single time its turn begins, which is a green gem that when taken will entangle a random enemy, or the enemy can end up entangling you. But the interesting thing with this is there is an elemental that does triple damage to all entangled enemies. The Tonga Bang, or whatever that thing is called, has impervious, has score reduction, has triple damage to entangled. And the amount of synergy that this will end up having with it should be pretty solid. So 4x elemental teams are probably going to go down that route going forward, as they in a combination of that kind of duo is going to be really, really strong. You're only going to be able to do it under elemental though. But interesting to see how that pans out in the future, as well as when we end up getting it. Probably get it around this Wednesday, though I didn't actually mention in the video yet. We'll have like a whole thing going over it tomorrow. But yeah, we're not actually going to be streaming on that day. But that's a later thing to discuss. But anyways, yeah, we'll probably mess around with it on stream on this Friday. But yeah, really good. Definitely make sure to get it. Anyways, another news. Other thing, Soulforge. So I kind of already mentioned it a little bit earlier. However, definitely make sure to pick up yourself a Pisia if you've been looking for it. You can try for it in either event keys this week, or just simply get it automatically through Soulforge. Of course, through Soulforge will cost 4,000 diamonds. Through the current event key system, it'll cost you as much RNG as it takes. But if you do want to try some of your event keys and you fail and you want to go and lean back on this, you can. Pisia, overall, not too bad. I personally don't like using it too often. However, it is definitely in the higher end of Mythics as far as viability. It ends up destroying all green gems. Creates destroy being particularly relevant because you actually mana accumulate all that. While he himself does not use green, obviously something else on your team generally will, of which you accumulate all the mana for that. And then it also creates blue gems equal to the number of green gems destroyed, while also creating them onto a board state that doesn't have the green. So as long as there's like 10 plus green on the board, he will generally extra turn, because you're going to have 10 less gems in that case, or even more or less gems, based on how many greens, and then also creating that many blues, which is not going to override anything, because you're not going to override the other blues, unless you have like frost gems or something, because I believe they still override special gems, but they don't override other blues. So your extra turn rate when there's 10 plus green on the board, when you end up destroying it, pretty solid. And yeah, he just mana accumulates a bunch of blue. Of course, blue going back into himself, as well as likely something else in your team if you're using this on your team. And the main thing that he's used for is not that, but there are 2 independent 30% chances that he could devour a random enemy. While he's not the only thing that has a multi-devour mechanic in the game, he has probably the most consistent multi-devour in the entire game. I guess you could kind of say Iron Gut in a sense, but technically, even though Iron Gut is spammable into his auto extra turn, he is technically a 1 devour troop, even though he can multi-devour in a given turn. Whereas this is the most consistent troop that specifically per cast has a multi-devour. So if you're looking for a multi-devourer, Pisia is pretty much the way to go, especially if you're doing a pretty blue-heavy team. Unfortunately, trait's pretty underwhelming, but he makes up for it with his ability being pretty over the top. And beyond that, that's pretty much the only thing you really want to pick up. Medusa's probably not worth it, especially now that we have, as far as a cursed stunner, we have Ossifer, so there's pretty much almost no reason to get Medusa now. Because why use Medusa when you basically get handed Ossifer for free? I guess if you don't currently have him traded to level 4, or you need to get him to level 4 to have him fully traded. But, you know, once you have Ossifer, I don't really feel like you will ever use Medusa again, as Ossifer is pretty much just better Medusa in every single way, and is even easier to obtain than Medusa. So yeah, overall, pretty nice. Anyways, beyond that, weapons pretty skippable this week unless you're looking for something like for an Underspire weapon. So if you want to get like Iron Wave to help you out in Underspire or something similar, that's pretty much the only time you're really going to be picking something up this week for your weapon. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Yeah, there's really not anything. I would say the most relevant weapon, oddly enough, actually is not in Soulforge right now. It comes out on Tuesday. Tomorrow is the Sea of Sorrows event, and through it you can end up getting the Writhing Staff. Writhing Staff is a pretty nice utility scroll weapon. It used to be one of the better ways to do skulls out of any weapon, though. Of course, we've gotten other alternatives since then, like all these Doom ones that have to convert, all the books, other similar things. However, if I can find where our Frithing Staff is, this one's still kind of interesting. The main gimmick of it is that it has a scatter damage, which gets rid of all the barriers on the opposing team. But then it also ends up creating some skulls while entangling the enemy. This is a pretty good combination, since of course if you do end up failing with your skulls, they're going to be entangled, so they won't be able to utilize on them. Also has a little bit of a mana drain, has a 3 mana drain over here, and I think it had like one other effect, like Submerge or something, which kind of makes sense as it is a pretty blue heavy Merlantis Kingdom and everything. Obviously would have Submerge as there's pretty much everything here. Not used too much in the current state of the game, though. Of the faction weapons that do exist, I would say this is still among one of the better several. So if you're looking for a offset skull weapon for hero, still among one of the better ones. Of course, a lot of situations you tend to just go with all these like doomed ones that have the doom skull convert and everything, but there's still some situations where you would want to use this, most notably if the entangle is really important for your team, as well as barrier removal. But also just the fact that you don't need alignment. Of course, you don't have guarantee alignment, but simply just being able to put 8 skulls onto the board without needing to worry about alignment can sometimes be better, depending on if you already have things that can create a lot of skulls. And aside from that, I believe that is everything. Of course, we'll be covering the teams tonight when we end up doing our stream at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we always do. Beyond that, I will, from the feedback, I will be putting all of the names for the team. So if you check this video later tonight or a day from now, we will have all the teams pinned comment and everything, and as well as the description. And instead of, or as including the team codes, so we'll have the team code as it normally does, so you can copy paste them. I will also once again be putting the full text of what everything is. So I'll be naming every single troop, the hero class that's used for it, maybe even the banner and stuff like that. So pretty much all the details in text form. So you don't have to look at like a bunch of random numbers, which obviously is just complete gibberish and is impossible to understand unless you just copy paste it in and put it in. But I will also have text form, so if you don't have a good way of copy pasting it or anything similar, you can simply just look at it and be able to get it in that way. Anyways, guys, if you still have any other feedback, anything you guys want me to go over, do let me know. And tonight we'll be going over everything else. Hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. Best of luck with the event, and apparently double EXP week. I was not expecting that, but I don't know, I guess I'll have to grind it a little bit. And I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.